Guji is actually not a country, but instead a zone inside Ethiopia that was only recently formed in 2002. I'm Ride, your Chief Espresso Officer, and today I'm going to look at why Guji is on the rise to become one of the greatest coffee producing zones in the world. There are four major regions that produce coffee in Ethiopia. There's Sidama, Yirgacheffe, which you should know by now, Harar, and Limu. And there's also a little village called Gesha, where you might have heard a special coffee came from that place hundreds of years ago and now has traveled to Panama to be called Panama Geisha coffee. And it's the most expensive coffee in the world. So let's talk a little bit about Guji. It used to be bundled in with Sidama, and until 2002, most of the coffee coming out of Guji was actually just called Sidama coffee. But now, Guji is coming up through the ranks to claim the title of the best coffee producers in the world. And they're not that far away from it, because the coffees themselves are tasting like jasmine and floral, with melons and peaches. Those are the most common flavors that there, and they're the most highly desirable flavors in coffee. The zone, or region called Guji, is actually named after one of the tribes of the Oromo people, who have roamed the mountains and the plains for thousands of years. And in 2002, they separated to form the Guji zone and claimed their cradle land as Gurja, and now there's about 5 million people living there. Now the land of the Guji zone is mountainous and rocky with rich and volcanic red soil, which is rich and fertile and perfect for carrying those nutrients that the coffee trees need to get those intense and sweet flavors. So coffee farming and coffee in general runs deep within the culture of the Guji people, with their philosophies being very special in the fact that they don't push their trees or their farms too far and use fertilizers and pesticides. In fact, they have a saying, which I'll quote, and that is to only use what nature provides us, not to try and produce more. And the coffee ceremonies are also a big part of this culture, with the community and families and friends coming together for 2 or 3 times a day to do these coffee ceremonies, and some of these are lasting 2 or 3 hours, but it's all about honoring that social connection. Now, the coffee ceremony in the Guji region is extremely important to their culture. It's called a buna, and it has very specific rules to go with it. It starts by roasting the coffee beans in a pan over an open flame. Then, once they're roasted, they're hand ground down into a fine powder using a mortar and pestle mostly. Then they slowly brew it in this device called a jabena, and then they finally serve it up with some water and lots of sugar. They never serve it with milk, however. But the second time round, they use the same coffee grinds and add more water to brew it a second and a third time. And even though these second and third times don't taste as good as the first time, which you'd know if you've watched any of my videos on how to brew coffee, they might not taste as good, but they are equally as important as that very first time. This particular coffee is from the Hambela washing station in a little town called Bulehora. Because the Guji farmers don't have a lot of land and they don't have that many coffee trees to look after, they collect all of their harvests and compile them together, take them to Hambela washing station to get processed and then shipped out to us. Now, these particular beans, or seeds as they're actually known, are a variety called heirloom. But heirloom's not very accurate, because if you can see closely, there are actually a lot of different sized cherry seeds in there. And that's because they're not all the same variety. Because in Ethiopia, they refer to any coffee tree that's been growing for more than 50 years and a variety that's older than that as heirloom, which gives it a big blanket sort of variety name. But unfortunately for the farmers, you get paid the same price whether you have a higher quality heirloom or a lower quality heirloom, because there's no classification about what variety is exactly the one that they're producing, which I think is extremely unfair, because everyone getting paid the same for different quality coffees doesn't make sense. When you've worked really hard to look after your particular farm and you've grown a really great crop, and then you just get paid the same as everyone else who didn't look after their farm well, I just disagree with that fundamentally. So why we are working with Hambela Washing Station is because they don't do that. They take all of their 370 clients all of the farmers from around the local area, and they cup and grade each coffee individually based on its own qualities. So whether it's still an heirloom variety and it's under that umbrella, doesn't matter, because if you produce the greatest crop from your farm in your backyard, then you'll get paid appropriately. And that's why I love dealing with Hambella Washing Station. This particular lot was harvested just at the end of last year in areas around 1,600 meters to about 2,000 meters above sea level. And it's using a process called a natural process. But essentially, they pick the cherries from the trees ripe. They're always just picking the ripe ones. Then they lay them out on these raised sunbeds that get rotated slowly over the next 15 to 20 days until all of that juicy, sweet, intense sugars have really developed around the seed, and then goes into that seed and traps it in there, so that when we brew it here, you get all of those beautiful, sweet, intense flavors. Now, this particular processing method, along with their precision and the care and the quality of this actual crop, means that it gets a 90 out of 100 cupping quality score, which is extremely high and very hard to attain. So I'm super excited to get hold of these beans and give them a try. And to give you a reference point, Geisha coffee, Panama Geisha, and there's other ones from Costa Rica and Colombia, they usually cup around 96, and they cost about $260 to $1,000 per kilo. So to get something that's a 90 cupping quality score, I'm extremely grateful to be able to get my hands on. Now, if you live in Australia, you can purchase some of these coffee beans online at my store at coffeebeansdelivered.com.au, or you can learn about all of the brewing methods that we have, and if you're overseas, you can purchase some similar ones, quality hopefully, and use the brewing guides that I created to help you get more out of it. Or follow us on social media and we'll show you some more insights into this beautiful, delicious coffee from Gujii. All right, so now that we've looked at all the history of Gujii and the history of this particular special coffee, let's get to my favorite part, the tasting. So first, we're going to put 22.5 grams of coffee beans into this and weigh it. And the reason I'm starting off at 22.5 grams is because that's my base starting point. Now I can adjust it up and down after that, but to start with, I always make sure I start off with a very, very basic recipe. If you're not using scales, just grind it till it's level with the top of the basket and depress it down by 5 millimeters. So I'm grinding it, and you can see it's quite fine, but obviously it's not powdery, a little bit finer than table salt. And fill it up, compress it down, give it a nice little polish. Make sure those grinds are interlocked there, give it a polish at the end, so it just gives that bit of extra resistance for the water to pick up all those beautiful oils. And now let's have a look at that shot. That is delicious. Okay, let's try it first without some milk. Oh wow, I can definitely taste blueberries. It's like eating a whole handful of blueberries mixed with like some really juicy chocolate. This, you've outdone yourself, Gujii. I can see why this cups so well. Now I'm going to try it on milk, using my unhomogenized milk because it just brings out the best flavors. Now, I'll steam, get it spinning, stretch it just a little bit. I'm only making a flat white for myself here, so I don't want to stretch it too much more. So, I first transfer it into the small one here, and I want to get this hot so it doesn't make the milk cold and change the consistency of the milk. I'm going to pour a bit of this in to here, and the reason I do this is just it gives it a silky texture, allows me to then pour hopefully some nice latte art, although I'm not on the machine as much as I like to be now, so latte art may not come. Well, need to get better at my latte art, but that's all right. And now we can try it on milk. Oh, that's so good. Yeah, that really is really nice. So there's very light chocolate now coming through. There's a hint of that blueberryness, It's obviously very creamy, so the milk's creamy, but that is just, if you're into chocolate and blueberries, this is definitely the coffee for you. Right, so that is how we make espresso for the Gujii Hambella Grade 1. And if you want to learn more about making coffee, doing espresso, check out the Ultimate Barista course online. Or if you want to learn more about the GUJI Coffee, go to coffeebeansdelivered.com.au, and they've got the entire range of coffees we have available there, including this delicious drink from Gujii. Okay, now let's try this as a V60 pour over. So I'm just waiting for the kettle to boil and we'll get started. All right, so we're gonna start off with 12 grams of coffee, and I'm gonna add 204 mils of water. And the water's at 94 degrees. And this is my base one. This is how I test what all my coffees are. I'm using a ratio of 17:1. So I'll put the grinds in. I'll wet the paper first, then I'll pop the grinds in. And now I'm gonna do what's called a bloom. And that's just 50 mils straight onto there just to help oxidize the coffee. It helps it degas, blooms a bit. And I'm gonna let it sit for about 30 seconds. And now I'm gonna pour in another 100 mil and then wait another 30 seconds. And I'm gonna finish it off, pour in the last 54 mils in and just let it sit for about a minute, and then we'll be tasting it. So bright and orange, ochre colors. Just stunning. And it smells, oh, just like jasmine tea. You know, just that florally tea. Oh, that is stunning. It's so delicious. It's just perfectly balanced. A lot more of that sort of floral flavors coming through, and even some sort of mandarin. Yeah. It's interesting how it's developed. There's definitely some blueberries in there, but I'm using this particular recipe, I'm tasting a lot more of that mandarin acidity. That's just so smooth. Oh, this is delicious. Probably my favorite so far. So there you have it. That's how you make beautiful V60 pour over for the Gujii Hambella Grade 1 coffee. I'm Ryan, your Chief Espresso Officer. Enjoy your brew.